Well, pay and conditions following Windsor's review is the big topic at this year's conference, and that's important, and I think it's necessary because for many years, for decades even, the pay and conditions of police officers have been based on a settlement from the late 1970s, which frankly has not kept pace with the demands of the service or the society that policing both should reflect and needs to recruit from. So there needs to be a modernisation of police pay and conditions. The question is, how can we modernise pay in a way which is fair, and how can we bring the police service more in line with other employers so that there's no longer such a division between police staff and police officers. Of course, the background to this is a reduction in funding as well, and that will mean that many people see this as a cost-cutting exercise, but that's, I think, the wrong interpretation. This reform is long overdue, and it would have been needed in good times and in bad. It's just unfortunate that it's happening now, but we'll see what the outcome is in the next few months. I think the vote in the House of Lords recently, did some damage to the selling of the policy, which I think the government still has a job to do on. The public are yet to be interested, frankly, or convinced that there's a overwhelming case to do this. But I think at the same time, there is a strong policy argument to say that the public and the police do need to be brought closer together. And one way of doing that is to change police governance so that the accountability of the police service is linked to a clear point of accountability, a single individual who's directly elected to answer for the service's record on crime, and crucially not to direct the police. A lot of the discussion in the Lords was about how this was an American system. There is no American system. This is not an import from the United States. All it really is, if it seems slightly alien to have civilian commissioners, all it really amounts to is actually a public safety mayor, somebody whose responsibility for public safety goes beyond the police, a leadership figure at the right level locally to coordinate agencies and then to answer for the public. But chief constables remain in charge of the police, and they're the ones who make decisions about arrests, about deployment of officers, and that's right. But the accountability to the public has to be through direct election in a modern democracy. So these public safety mayors, I think, still have a very good argument in their favour, and I think the government's shown that it's committed to get this bill through. Well, we're doing a number of pieces of work on the policing issues. So we're looking at the moment at manpower and issues around how forces currently deploy the assets they have. We make the argument that a police officer is your most valuable asset, so even if you had all the money in the world, it would be a waste and it wouldn't be good value for the taxpayer if that valuable asset, your sworn officer, was doing a job they shouldn't be doing or was not being deployed correctly. So we're looking in some detail at that for a report which is due out before the summer. We're also looking at the future of policing, taking us beyond the next 4 years, trying to raise people's sights to look at the future of what policing in England and Wales might look like in 10 years' time, and that's our Policing in 2020 project later in the year. Well, this is my first time speaking as a panellist at the Police Federation conference, and I'd say that the mood is one of concern, one of anxiety. There's a lot of discussion about what the impact of the pay and condition changes might be. Last year it was very interesting. The Home Secretary arrived a matter of days after the coalition government formed, and the Police Federation had their first chance to hear from the Home Secretary, gave her a warm welcome, liked to hear about her plans for removing bureaucracy and driving the fight against crime, but they didn't quite have the measure of the government at that point. This year we've had a year when we've had the Windsor report into pay and conditions, we've had proposed changes to police pensions, big budget reductions and changes proposed for police pay. This year, I think the government and the Home Secretary and the Police Minister are facing a more difficult audience, an audience that's seen some of the policies and doesn't much like what it's seen, but I think in general terms, people are engaging, people are prepared to listen, and the arguments have been quite robust on both sides.